In today's episode of True Crime Tales and Mysteries, we are looking into kidnapping and murder of Sarah Everard. Sarah Everard, whose case came to be known on social media under the hashtag "She was just walking home." That was it. One late evening on March 3rd, 2021, Sarah Everard was walking home from her friend's place in Clapham Common to her apartment in Brixton, London. A walk of about 15 minutes, give or take. She never reached home, never called or texted her friends or family as she usually did whenever she walked home alone. Missing persons quickly turned into kidnapping, and as days and hours passed, just what happened to her took a deeply disturbing turn. This was not your usual kidnapping and murder we are so used to hearing on the news. This case brought to front the failures of Metropolitan Police when one of their own was found to be the perpetrator. It was shocking and deeply disturbing. Welcome to my channel, everyone. If you like this video, please subscribe and leave a comment below. Thank you. Now let's get back into the video. 49-year-old police constable and firearms officer Wayne Couzens of the Met Police had joined the Met from Civil Nuclear Constabulary in September 2018 and in February 2020 was assigned to the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Branch, the division responsible for uniformed protection of government and diplomatic premises. An authorized firearms officer is a British police officer who is authorized and trained to carry and use firearms. The designation is significant because most officers in the United Kingdom do not routinely carry firearms. Couzens had not undergone enhanced vetting as part of this recruitment, nor had he gone through the mandatory 2-year probation period with the Met before joining the PADP. This is of note in light of other details that came out later during the investigation. Questions were raised against the Met for failing to investigate allegations of indecent exposure by Mr. Couzens on 2 separate occasions. The latest one was 3 days before Sarah's disappearance. If they had taken the allegations seriously, could the tragedy been stopped? I believe so. Now coming back to Sarah's story. Sarah Everard at the time of her death was 33 years old. She was working as a marketing executive for a digital media company. She was in a steady relationship with her boyfriend of several years. She was also saving to buy a house, looking forward to getting married and having a family of her own. In other words, she was a responsible, sensible, and loving person, someone who always followed rules and did the right thing. On that fateful evening in March, she left her friend's house in Leithway Road near Clapham Junction around 9 p.m. Walked along 8205 South Circular Road across the Common towards her home in Brixton Hill. She called her boyfriend on the way, spoke to him for about 15 minutes. Call ended at around 9:28 p.m. or thereabout. She made plans to meet him the next day, resumed her walk, and on the way was seen on the doorbell camera near Clapham Common, walking towards Tulse Hill. That was one of the last seen images of her. Then she was gone, vanished into the thin air. There were no traces of her after that. Police checked CCTV cameras on the storefront near her home. There was no recording of her walking past, meaning she never reached home that night. By next morning, she had not called or texted any of her friends or family as she usually did to let them know she had reached home safe. This raised some concern. She also failed to attend a scheduled client meeting on the 4th March. This was highly unlike her. She was not known to miss scheduled work meetings without informing anyone or rescheduling if she had some conflict. That morning, her boyfriend Josh texted her. He didn't get any reply. He thought that was strange. When the evening rolled, she had still not made any contact and didn't meet him as they had planned. He was concerned enough to go check on her. When there was no answer and flat seemed empty, her phone also was switched off. He called around to check nearby hospitals. When he was sure no one had seen or heard from Sarah since the night before, he reported her missing. According to the website missingpeople.org, someone is reported missing every 90 seconds. Approximately 170,000 people are reported missing every year. 75% of adults are found within 24 hours of reported missing. Sarah's case from the start was treated as a high priority. It didn't seem like she had vanished of her own free will, so the agonizing search began. Her friends Cousens plastered Clapham area with missing persons posters and spread the news via social media for widest reach. Her family traveled from York to help search for her. Search and rescue teams were set up and they got to work. They searched the nearby pond and parks and shrubs. Specialist officers were tracing her path back home for more clues. Clapham Common and nearby areas were searched. Police visited nearly 750 homes in search of clues. At this point, there was very little progress. There was still no clue about her whereabouts or what had transpired on the night she disappeared. Understandably, her family were heartbroken. They knew this was totally out of character for her. She was well loved, had a beautiful life to look forward to. Amazing family and friends who loved her. Great job that she excelled at. There was no way she would vanish out of her own free will. They just wanted her home, safe. Search progressed, and on March 9th, a significant development in the case emerged. A serving Met officer was arrested at his home in Deal, Kent, on suspicion of kidnapping Sarah Everard. When the identity of the perpetrator was first revealed, it came as a shock. No one had expected this outcome. On that day, police arrived at Couzens' house at 5:45 in the evening and entered his home at around 7:50 to make an arrest. Around 40 minutes before he was arrested, Couzens tried to wipe the data from his phone. When interviewed, he initially claimed not to recognize Everard after being shown a photograph of her. He then claimed to be having financial problems. He was, according to him, being threatened by a gang of Eastern Europeans. They were demanding he pick up girls and deliver to them, and if he failed, they would hurt his family. He had no other option but to kidnap someone. He also suggested they took her in a white Sprinter van, and there were 3 of them. He had no choice. This, of course, was a complete fabrication. He was known for unwanted extracurricular activities among his colleagues. They called him the rapist. That was his work nickname. I don't even want to think what kind of workplace conversation this inspired. How was this behavior okay for a law enforcement officer? I wish someone had paid attention. Search was still on for Sarah at this time. It still remained a rescue mission. On 10th March, exactly 7 days after she disappeared, remains were found in a woodland stream in Ashford, Kent, just meters from land owned by Couzens. Hours later, he was arrested. Details of the arrest and the identity of the alleged killer were made public on the same day, resulting in a huge uproar Met Police were not prepared for. Let's go back and retrace the events from March 3rd. How did Sarah go from just taking a walk home from an evening with a friend to being kidnapped and killed by a police officer? I think the events were set in motion few weeks before when Couzens drove the same exact route he would take on the day he kidnapped Sarah, in all probability mapping out the areas where he can find lone women walking. On February 28th, when Wayne Couzens booked a white Vauxhall insignia from a car hire company in Dover, he made sure his hire car somewhat resembled an unmarked police car to make his ruse believable. On March 3rd, after completing a 12-hour shift in US Embassy in London, he traveled to Dover to collect the car from the rental and drove back to London. He lived with his family in Kent. So why did he drive back to London? This to me suggests he was looking for a prey that night. It was 9:34. His rented Vauxhall was parked on the pavement outside the Poindus Court. Police have a doorbell camera footage of Sarah walking past Poindus Road at 9:28, couple of minutes away from where Couzens was parked. It is by no means a quiet road, but more of a main road, well lit. She was also captured on the dashcam of a passing police car 4 minutes later. When she reached his Vauxhall, Couzens stopped Sarah and showed her his police warrant card before handcuffing her for breach of lockdown rules. If I remember correctly, in March 2021, UK was in 3rd lockdown. Rules were a little flexible than the first one, but still confusing enough for Sarah to comply, I guess, like many law-abiding citizens would. As we now know from family and friends, she wasn't the one to intentionally break rules or look for trouble. At the same time, she wasn't gullible, so he must have been pretty convincing for her to be willingly handcuffed. Or maybe she was in a state of shock, didn't fully comprehend what was taking place. I tried to put myself in that situation. What would I do? Would I refuse? Will I be in more trouble for resisting arrest? My assumption here is Couzens didn't give her time to think at all. He made an arrest before she could gather her wits about her. Once she was inside the car with him, it was all over for her. A couple traveling past in the car saw it happen. She was in the process of getting handcuffed, but they assumed, like many of us would, she must have done something wrong. They described the event as the woman on the pavement had her left arm behind her back and was in the process of giving her other arm as the man in the dark clothing handcuffed her, they told the prosecutor. They thought an undercover police officer was arresting a woman. Couzens and Everard were twice captured by the dash cam on a passing bus. The first instance at 9:35 showed them beside the hired Vauxhall, and the second at 9:37 showed the Vauxhall's number plate. Around this time, Couzens and Everard entered the car and Couzens drove to Kent. There is a footage of her sitting in the rear seat of his car. Couzens is in the front seat. The route of the car was retrospectively tracked using CCTV and automatic number plate recognition systems. He drove almost 80 miles to Dover. His car was seen again on CCTV 2 hours later at 11:30 p.m. in Kent. Sarah might have realized at this point something was not right. It's hard to imagine what she was thinking, sitting in the backseat of a supposed police car, handcuffed, completely vulnerable. I cannot even fathom the terror she must have felt. Confusion and dread for what was still to come. By 11:43, Couzens and Everard were in Dover. From there, he transferred Sarah to his personal Seat car. Between 11:53 and 12:57 on 4th March, Couzens' mobile phone connected to cell sites in the nearby area. It is believed that this is when he assaulted Sarah. 2:34 a.m., Couzens purchased drinks from a Dover petrol station, like everything was normal. According to reports, he had strangled Everard using his police duty belt by this time. Couzens then drove to Hotsford near Ashford, where his car was captured on CCTV in the area between 3:22 a.m. and 6:32 a.m. before driving back to Dover to switch back into his rental car, returning it at 8:26 a.m. on 4th March. After he returned the hire car, he drove his personal car to Sandwich, a place near Kent, disposing of Everard's mobile phone in one of the town's watercourses at around 9:21. Later that day, Everard's boyfriend Josh reported her missing. On 5th March, shortly after 11 in the morning, Couzens bought and filled a petrol container at a service station in Whitfield. He then drove to Hotsford, where his car was captured on CCTV at 12:37 in the afternoon, and burned Everard's body inside a refrigerator. This is the third case I've come across in less than 3 weeks where a killer used refrigerator to hide the body of his victim. Does this mean all criminals at some basic level think alike? At 1:47 in the afternoon, he bought 2 large builder's bags from B&Q, famous DIY chain store in the UK, before returning to Hotsford on 7th March, where he used one of the bags to dispose Sarah's remains in a nearby pond. On 8th March, he reported himself ill from work, handing in his equipment including his police belt and handcuffs. He also returned his gun, stating he was suffering from stress and no longer wanted to carry a gun. Search was still on for Sarah. Even though Couzens was a suspect, they did not have all the evidence to arrest him yet. 10th March, in the evening at about 4:20, search team in Hotsford found human remains in a large builder's bag, approximately 100 meters from a plot of land that Couzens owned. Police in Dover also searched the site of a former body repair garage, previously owned by Couzens' family, at the top of the White Cliffs. On 12th March, Everard's body was identified through dental records. She was so badly burned, there was no other way. Beautiful, vivacious, full of life Sarah Everard was reduced to rubble of ashes and bones. 2 days later, police focused a search operation around the rope walk in Sandwich and cordoned off approximately 1 square mile of the town. On 16th March, police continued to comb woodland in Kent, and police divers in Sandwich searched under water for Sarah's mobile and found her phone in a stream near Sandwich. On 11th March, Couzens was hospitalized following a head injury sustained in custody. He was again briefly hospitalized the following day after a similar injury. After the incident on 11th March, police said the injury was sustained while he was alone in his cell. Couzens was charged with Everard's kidnapping and murder on 12th March, following authorization from the Crown Prosecution Service. He appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court on 13th March and was remanded in custody before appearing at the Old Baileys via a video link from Belmarsh Prison on 16th March. Everard's funeral took place on 22nd May at Helsington Church in Helsington near York. The results of a post-mortem held at Williams Harvey Hospital in Ashford were released on 1st June. The investigation concluded that she had died from compression of the neck, strangled by Couzens' police belt. On 8th June 2021, Couzens pleaded guilty to kidnap and rape and admitted responsibility for Everard's death. At the hearing on 9th July, Couzens pleaded guilty to murder. On video link from Belmarsh Prison, he kept his head down and was shaking slightly. He and the victim were complete strangers and were unknown to each other prior to her abduction. After carrying out such a brutal murder, he spent the next days as if nothing had happened, went about his life, took his dog to the vet, took his family on a day out. He also tried to hide his track and destroy evidence. After the plea hearing, it was reported that Kent police had received a report in 2015 of a man in a car in Dover, naked from the waist down. It was believed that there may have been enough information recorded in the Kent police system to have identified the man as Couzens, who was a serving police officer at the time. Speaking outside the Old Bailey, Cressida Deck, the commissioner of Met Police at the time, said she felt sickened and angered and devastated by Couzens' crime, adding, "They were dreadful and everyone in police feels betrayed. Sarah was a fantastic, talented young woman with a whole life ahead of her, and that has been snatched away." The sentencing hearing began on 29 September 2021, following medical and psychiatric reports. Couzens' lawyer asked sentencing judge Lord Justice Fulford to consider imposing a life sentence with eligibility for parole, which would allow Couzens to become eligible for release on license in his 80s. On 30th September, Couzens was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, with Justice Fulford justifying the severity of the punishment by saying that Couzens' use of his position as a police officer to detain Everard was the vital factor which, in his view, made the seriousness of his case exceptionally high. He also said his warped, selfish, and brutal crimes had eroded the public confidence in the police. In October 2021, it was reported that Couzens was applying for leave to appeal against his sentence. In July 2022, his appeal against his whole life sentence was rejected by Court of Appeal. As of December 2021, Couzens is imprisoned at His Majesty's Prison in County Durham. In March 2022, Couzens was further charged with 4 counts of indecent exposure related to alleged incidents in January and February of 2021. In February 2023, Couzens pleaded guilty to 3 indecent exposures that took place in Kent in 2020 and 2021. People like Wayne Couzens, who are allowed to get away with crimes because of the failure of the system, think they are above the law. The life of an innocent woman who was a stranger to him, who had always lived by the law, did not mean anything to him. I've heard the statements by her family in court, and it is heartbreaking. As all of them have said, any punishment he received is not enough. It still wouldn't bring back a daughter, a sister, a friend that Sarah Everard was. And the brutal way her life ended will always leave the worst kind of void for them all. This case, in a way, brought to head the failures of system, especially shortcomings of Met Police, as well as violence against women. A vigil was held in City of London in memory of Sarah Everard, others like her who lost their lives to senseless violence. Met Police had advised advised against a large gathering, citing COVID restrictions, but people still turned up in large numbers. It was attended by Princess of Wales, Catherine Middleton. Even though it started peacefully, it got violent as the police tried to restrict the crowd. There are images of officers restraining attendees forcefully, which turned out to be a PR nightmare for the Met Police later on. It did not help the scrutiny they were and are still under. Met Police have been still reeling with multiple accounts of police officers breaching law and getting away with it. Sexism and misogyny is commonplace, and cases of their own officers' misbehaviors and offenses went unchecked for far too long, for which Sarah Everard and others like her had to pay the price. I also feel for Couzens' family here. They were innocent bystanders in this. When he decided to break the law he was supposed to be upholding, he also destroyed his own family in the process. To conclude, I will leave you with this thought. If you were ever in a situation Sarah found herself in, what would you have done? Would you have complied and trusted the officer that she would let you go once they realized the mistake? Or would you have questioned the arrest and would have refused to comply, asking for evidence? What would you have done? I hope Sarah's family finds the strength they need to go on without her. I hope they find peace. Thank you for being a part of this video. If you like this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.